I already know a good chunk of people who clicked on this video are commenting, no, Magic the Gathering's 25th anniversary $1,000 web exclusive booster packs that only contained proxies was the worst. Pokemon's $300 premium classic collection that had 3 decks of proxy cards, but for whatever reason only had 1 copy of each one of the big ones. Even though they were proxies, that was the worst. You gotta understand that Magic and Pokemon are part of the big 3. They can afford to experiment with ludicrously priced product, and not risk losing their audience. Don't worry, I'll explain Grand Archive and the Recollection deck situation like you have no idea what's going on. Chapter 1. What the hell is a Grand Archive? Grand Archive started as a Kickstarter game, a game made by disenfranchised Magic the Gathering players. Magic hits on the Pro Tour, kept making web exclusives, and let's be honest, they were taking the game into certain political directions. So Weebs of the Shore produced a game that was a mix of some of the best systems of other card games combined into one. You pick a champion, kind of like Magic's Commander system. You also choose a starting basic element for your champion. This meant you always had dual element champions. The material deck is like Yu-Gi-Oh's extra deck. It's limited to bringing out something once per turn, but it lets you adapt to situations when your hand isn't so hot. Combat is kind of a mix of Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! You can tap allies to attack, and generally tapped allies can't defend. You can attack with things one at a time, and choose targets like Yu-Gi-Oh! Speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh!, we've picked a good time to launch the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Also had a good chunk of players who migrated over to Grand Archive. Pendulums, Link Monsters, the game's new systems were not only confusing, but boring. Turns started taking 15 minutes per player. With 2 different trading card gamers joining Grand Archive, were the former Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! Players gonna butt heads? Chapter 2. What's a Recollection deck and why do they suck? Think of the Recollection decks as a premium, expensive way to get a complete deck. Pokemon had Battle Arena decks, Yu-Gi-Oh! Had structure decks. The Recollection decks were supposed to be like those. The first ones released were at the same time as the 4th booster set in the game. Before we get into that, I think we should take a look at the pressure test of the cost of the game. When Grand Archive was first introduced, it was actually stupidly cheap. Judging Guide is a staple to this day, but you can get her for just 10 to 15 bucks. Ghost of Pendragon is a Crux staple, was only 25 bucks. The first 2 Recollection decks were Slime Sylvie and Tristan. Tristan was a mess who needed 4 copies of a card called Sadie. That sucked considering how expensive Sadie was. Sylvie was much more competitive. Even better, she was one of the best decks of the format. Around the release of these Recollection decks, prices had started to increase. Dungeon Guide was 25 apiece, and you needed 4 of them for a complete deck. The pressure gauge was considered light by most players. Now personally, I was pretty annoyed that the Dungeon Guides weren't included in these decks. Pokemon had much more complete decks with their Battle Arena series. While Yu-Gi-Oh! Needed you to buy 3 structure decks, it was about the same cost as these Grand Archive Recollection decks, and it was also more complete. Chapter 3. This is why we can't have nice things. So the game has a decent entry point with Sylvie. Sure, you had to spend another $100 on Dungeon Guide to actually have a competitive deck, but that's still pretty cheap compared to some other card games. At least that's what the pros argued. Speaking of pros, guess who was unhappy? Now after you got Dungeon Guide, there was one more pricey card you needed. At Grand Archive there are extremely powerful cards called Divine Relics. These cards are so good you can only have 1 Divine Relic in your deck at a time. Sylvie needed a relic called Quicksilver Grail. It just so happened that Quicksilver Grail came in a set that was massively overprinted. As cheap as I am, even I paid the 25 bucks for Grail. A cheap tier 1 deck like Sylvie meant there was a lot of competition for pro players. One of the Grand Archive selling points is the generous pricing at events. Why should people who want to make a living from this card game have to deal with all these casual players having an even footing with them? Sayings like, slimes are overtuned, were thrown around. And believe it or not, casual viewer, the community bought it. Everyone nodded their heads, even those who get screwed over by this. But Weebs wasn't actually going to start making weaker Recollection decks in the first generation's one, right? Chapter 4. Yes, they actually did it. Now a year had passed since the release of the last Recollection decks. A lot of staples had risen in price. Dream Fairy and Frostborn Paladin were around $15 American. How's the pressure gauge? Well, it's still doing pretty good. We're not at the medium mark, but things look like they could get there. Dungeon Guide got reprinted in the recent set, Mortal Ambition. Abyssal Heaven was released with the Recollection decks, and they made it so Gwodra's UR Fate Stone didn't take up your UR slot when you pulled one. Meaning, if you pulled one of these, you could still pull something else in UR. So how were the Recollection decks? Despite what you hear from other Grand Archive YouTubers, awful. These decks were so bad that I had a competition in one of my other videos on which one was worse, and people don't agree on which one it was. Let's briefly go over them, and you can decide. Dao Chan used a lot of what came in her deck for her competitive build after you bought the cards you needed. Her final price was about the same as other competitive decks. The problem was she needed a lot of cards that were going to only be used in her. So what do I mean by that? Remember how at the start of the video I mentioned champions could pick a basic element? Well, a lot of these basic element cards work with other champion builds. Arthur works with Fire Lorraine, but also works with Fire Xander. A major plus about this is if your deck starts to suck in the meta, you could switch. In other words, Dao Chan was a commitment. Now one final word about Dao Chan. She had no practical win condition out of the box. She had 2 burn cards that need a lot of setup, and her level 3 didn't really do anything. But then there's Guoja. Guoja comes with one option, but actually has 4 different Fable Face Stones you can build into. So pick your build and ditch almost every single card that came in her Recollection deck. Yup, even Fire. Her Recollection deck was focused on Norm and Luxem, and that was a complete bust. Now as bad as Guoja is, she did come with a win condition. Her Fable Face Stone could transform itself into a wall that some decks just couldn't deal with. You'd be a turd at locals, but at least you stood a feasible chance of winning. So there you have it, dear viewer, which one is worse? Dao Chan uses a lot of cards that come in her deck, but you get locked into using her without a good ability to switch to something else. Guoja gives some flexibility with being able to change elements, but you'd have to replace almost everything that came with her. Chapter 5. Where were all the Grand Archive YouTubers during all this? I need you guys to understand that Grand Archive gets expensive when you're trying to build a lot of different decks. That means the Weave of the Shore sponsorship is really important. I can't even afford the game with the decks I own now, but we'll get into that later. Should we chastise sponsored positive reviews on newly released product? Not really. I take issue with not addressing the lack of value later on after release though, especially with a lot of these guys who call for the nerfing of Recollection decks after the Slime deck release. Chapter 6. What's the crux of the issue? Huh? What's going on with the pressure gauge? How did we get from approaching medium to high so quickly? Well, Distorted Reflections came out. You know how we kept going mentioning Dungeon Guide throughout this video? Meet the new guide, Liminal Guide. Let's say you hard level to level 1. You randomly banish a card from memory. Now Liminal Guide's effect activates. He brings himself out of the graveyard and draws you a card. Since you lost 1 card leveling but got 2 cards with Liminal Guide's effect, you actually gained advantage for leveling up instead of losing it. You'd break even for going to level 2, and trust me, only losing 1 card to card advantage going to level 3 is still really good. Not every deck will run Liminal Guide, but most will. That includes a lot of older decks. Now, I didn't really complain or say anything at this point. Why? Because all card games have expensive formats. It's inevitable. Whoa! Our pressure gauge has burst at the seams! What is happening? The release of the Merlin Recollection deck, of course! Can you imagine a Pikachu deck without Pikachu? Can you imagine a Blue Eyes White Dragon deck without old Blue Eyes? Well, that's exactly what happened with Merlin. Meet Ghost of Pendragon. This boy slices, he dices, he bounces back Regalia to draw 2 cards. My goodness, even if you don't play Grand Archive, can you not just tell this thing's good? You get most Regalia for free every turn. There are ways to cheat them out. You can even have some Regalia come out for free. Don't just count bouncing back powerful swords that are about to break. This card is so good, even decks that would traditionally only go to level 1 would sometimes just throw a level 2 and 3 just to run this thing. Ghost of Pendragon is crux. I think in the next chapter, we'll address some of the rage replies we're about to get. Chapter 7. Yes, Grand Archive competes with the big 3 no matter how much certain people want to stomp their feet and moan about it. Remember at the start of the video about how I mentioned the premium Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh decks? The truth is, those 2 really do offer much better value than the Slime deck. To me, it didn't make much sense to make the new Recollection decks worse out of the box than that deck. Sylvie's only real problem was no Dungeon Guide. The other cards you needed were dirt cheap. And that's how a premium deck's supposed to be. It's expensive to buy, but it gets you the chance to get a top 3 at locals, and you can win prizes to either start building another deck or give you something to trade to make your current one better. Grand Archive YouTubers seem to think having these glorified starter decks are how the other TCGs do it. I can't tell if this is a magic thing. As I've already showed, this just isn't the case in other TCGs. Chapter 8. who's the Merlin Recollection deck even for? I think it's pretty obvious that Ghost of Pendragon wasn't included, but let's change gears and see what valuable reprints were. After all, Donavash is out of print and Fractured Crown has been pulled from shelves from being overprinted. Surely we got Dungeon Guide by now. Nothing. We get absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, Ghost of Pendragon wasn't reprinted in the new set or event pack either. In the current format, I think it's safe to say that Crux is one of the most expensive decks, if not the most expensive deck to build, before this Recollection deck. Not only does it need Ghost of Pendragon, it needs Liminal Guide, Cheshire Cat, The Looking Glass. See the problem? Despite being a premium deck, it does nothing! It's more of a supplement for people who already have Key Crux cards rather than starting point. Your best bet, if you want to turn this into a affordable deck, is to convert it into a fire attribute. This turns her into the Gwoja situation again. But surely things don't get worse, right? Chapter 9, it gets worse! The way previous event packs worked, they were pretty much just cards from the current set. Most decks need a variety of hard to pull cards, so these event packs help supplement your collection. I know a lot of players buy a few boxes, but I'm the kind of person to buy a single box if any. Event packs help me build up my set of rare cards or give me something to trade. Now, despite my complaining in this video, Weebs in Store actually does listen to the community. They're probably even watching this now. Price creep was already a known issue, and one of my suggestions was either a tin release or some sort of collection. I realize now that Weebs is probably too small for these kind of releases. Weebs decided to change event packs from the current set to a reprint set of older cards. That sounds like a great idea, with the best of intentions. What could possibly go wrong? Remember how our pressure gauge jumped high all of a sudden? That's because of the power creep for the newest set. The reprints are kind of cool, but even as a new player, I just want the newest stuff. This especially hurts for people who just want to buy one box. Suddenly, buying a box or two doesn't make much sense. You have to buy singles to build up your collection anyway, so why bother with the box at all? It also really sucks for people just starting out the Merlin Recollection. Most of the cards you want to improve with her are in the new set. These reprints don't really help you too much. There are special art reprints that are valuable, but that's only if your locals as a collector. If your locals consist almost entirely of people who only want cards to play the game, you're out of luck. Personally, I hate selling online. This just adds one extra step for some people. Now, instead of just trading cards and event packs for cards of the current set you'll want to have, you're just going to have to buy the cards. It was kind of nice just to be able to trade newly released cards for each other right away, but oh well. Chapter 10. Addressing the counterarguments. I think the first thing I'm going to hear is this game doesn't have to be like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon. Why shouldn't collectors be made a major factor? After all, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon are only popular because of their TV shows. This is one of the most brain-dead millennial/zoomer takes I've ever heard in my entire life. The Pokemon trading card was brought over by Wizards of the Coast, who had years of experience running Magic the Gathering. Pokemon had VHS advertisements. They gave away trading cards when you saw the movie, and had an agreement with Toys R Us to hold locals. Yeah, that's right. Instead of locals being held in a dark hole in the wall, parents had the option to bring their kids to play at Toys R Us. You got stamp sheets and rewarded for more than just winning the game or power gaming. In the days before widespread internet access, this was a lot of people's only way to translate the ancient Mew card they got from the movie. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh's popularity was from the TV show initially. After all, after the classic series, other seasons and series got shortened or cancelled. Despite that, Yu-Gi-Oh kept getting more and more popular until it won the Guinness Book of World Records title for most trading cards sold. How the heck did Yu-Gi get even more popular than the other two at some point? Meet the real hero or villain of trading card games, Bob. Bob is the company accountant, and Bob figures out the best return on investment. If they mass reprint a card, how does it affect new player acquisition versus players exiting the game? These companies' Bobs are smarter than you, me, Grand Archive YouTubers, even Weebs of the Shore. They're part of a multi-billion-dollar company, and they have decades of experience. Thanks, Bob. Now, what can we determine from Bob running Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon? Well, that sacrifices are necessary to attract new players and keep old players interested. Dragapult EX was the best deck in the format and made its debut booster box valuable. You still got 4 of them, and a Fezandipity EX, along with most of the core staple cards you need that your other decks could use. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was way more player focused with old box reprints, meta cards reprints, and also reprinted cards in structured decks with the possibility of giving you new support for them. This isn't Bob screwing over collectors. This is Bob using decades of experience and research to find the best way to grow the game and acquire new players. Another thing that people might want to argue is Slimes didn't have reprints and was considered the best deck, so why can't other Recollection decks not reproduce the same results? When the Slime deck came out, Dawn of Ashes and Fractured Crown were the only powerful sets at the time. Dawn of Ashes didn't have a lot of staples at high rarity, so getting staples was fairly cheap and easy. Fractured Crown was way overprinted, which I actually brought up before. The Alchemical Revolution set wasn't anything to write home about at the time of its release. Remember, Arasada didn't have her Cauldron yet. Mercurial Heart did have slime cards Sylvie could use, but there were some substitutes in Fractured Crown that were fine replacements, which kept those card prices down. Weebs is a small company. They have to do this to grow the game. It's been 2 years. 2 years of you guys saying that. Waiting 2 years for a decent premium starting deck is us cutting Weebs a break for being small. I want to address the investment issue when reprints make cards worthless. Would you rather have a valuable card go to pennies or all your cards go to pennies? The TCG market is a cutthroat business, and if you keep insisting Weebs doesn't listen to the big three's Bobs, that's what's going to happen. Chapter 11. Compromising to avoid bankruptcy. Now I get that a good chunk of the community is still against me despite my flawless arguments. I remember one situation where Yu-Gi-Oh! Left out an important card from a structure deck. They managed to turn this into an event. They made Tour Guide from the Underworld really easy to pull for their new draft pack. Tour Guide became a $10 card. I actually pulled 2 copies for my first draft. Now I'm not saying to put Ghost of Pendragon into draft packs. What I am saying is to put Ghost of Pendragon into an event pack as regular rare cards. Despite what people think of Konami's reprint policy, I remember when Maxi was put into a Hanzo tin and tanked its value. After the Twins print run, it didn't take long for the card value to start going up again. I imagine this would be the same case with Ghost of Pendragon. It's too bad this wasn't done with the release of Merlin. It would have been really enticing for new players or older players who had quit the game to start attending locals. Depending on how many new players rushed in, it might not have taken the value of Ghost of Pendragon as much as you'd think. Let me know in the comments below how you feel. Check out this video to see how Grand Archive prices out new players here.